This week on the Salesforce Admins podcast, we're thrilled to welcome back Jennifer Lee to talk about the Spring 25 release and all of its exciting features. Now, as you know, Jennifer is lead admin evangelist here on the admin relations team at Salesforce and host of the How I Solved It and Automate This video series on YouTube. She's also known for this blog post, which comes out with every release. I know you find it incredibly helpful. I do. Now, before we jump into the conversation with Jennifer, I want to make sure that you are following the Salesforce Admins podcast on your favorite platform so that you never miss an episode, which could include really cool features like this one. So with that, let's get Jennifer on the podcast. So Jen, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Glad to be back.
Well, it's almost spring. It doesn't feel like it where we're at, but isn't that how it always is with all of our releases?
I just want it to fast forward.
Yes.
Let me to spring.
Right. But you can fast forward in your orgs because we're going to talk about Spring 25 release features. And Jen, back on January 16th, you put out an amazing blog post. I think it's the most popular blog post every year. So let's start off with going over some spring stuff and familiarizing people with what you do at Salesforce and go from there.
Yeah, sure. I guess I can start with what I do at Salesforce, and then we'll dive into the Spring 25 fun features. So Jennifer Lee, lead admin evangelist on the admin relations team with Mike. And I'm also the host of How I Solved It, Automate This on our YouTube channel. And I write our mega blog releases for each of our 3 releases a year. And I speak at various Salesforce events. So you've seen me at TDX, Dreamforce, and other community events. So let's dive into Spring 25. So I'm really excited about these Agentforce AI features coming first because that's what we're talking about these days is Agentforce and AI. So really excited that folks can get their hands on Agentforce for free with Salesforce Foundations. So you can get access to Agentforce for Sales and Agentforce for Service and start playing around with it and getting your hands dirty. So that's pretty cool. And then also sometime in the spring release, we'll also add in the ability to have agent quick actions placed right on your record pages. So your users don't need to think of, what's the correct prompt that I should use with the employee agent to get the thing that I want. They can just click a button and we're just going to pass over that prompt into the employee agent for them. So they'll get a consistent response every single time. So they don't have to figure out how to word your prompts.
This is so cool. When you showed this, because you sent around the GIF that you have in the blog, I was like, I love buttons.
Yes.
I love buttons. Users love buttons. People like to click buttons. And you get a sparkle little button, I'm telling you, because I also feel like when we talk AI, people just assume they know how to use it. And it's a little bit of an art. We're kind of early days of getting AI to respond the way you want it to. And the ability for an admin to set up a prompt, because you show this in the GIF in the blog, the right wording, it kind of helps train your users how to be good prompt writers.
Uh-huh.
I love it.
Exactly.
This is the most exciting feature for me. I could talk about it all day.
And for those who were early adopters and they built Einstein bots in your org, you can now use that as a starting point to create your Agentforce service agent. How cool is that? You don't have to start from scratch. You're I have this thing over here. I want to make this into agent, click a few buttons, and then it just creates that draft for you. So you have a starting point. So that's pretty cool. And then a couple of the other AI features that we have for those Flownatics out there.
Oh, yes. Can't forget the Flownatics.
Or even like you're new to Flow, right? You now have, we're going GA, so generally available, the ability to use natural language to describe what your automation should be. And then it creates that flow behind the scenes for you, right? That starting point. So that's pretty cool. So that's now GA. There's also if you need help with formulas, right, in your flows, you can describe it, right? You don't have to go and know what the right syntax is. You describe what you want, and then it generates it for you. Again, that's such an improvement because I remember back in the day, I would have to go Google everything because I'm not a great formula.
Nobody's a good formula. There's like 3 people in the world that are good at formulas, and they're the ones that answer all our questions. But not kidding, formulas and validation rules were always top performers in admin track for the longest time. I could probably bring those sessions back, and they'd still be top performers. Everybody needs help. I still Google formulas for like Google Sheets and stuff.
Yeah, and I attended those sessions.
Yeah, I'm sure. Oh man, yeah, formulas are that's the stuff that I'm excited for Einstein.
Yeah.
You know, that like, oh, help me do this, and then it spits it out for me.
And then another thing for Flownatics out there is imagine, you're in an org, you didn't build the flow that you need to troubleshoot, and you have no idea what this flow does. Well, now you can go in and with a click of a button, Einstein will summarize what's going on in that flow for you.
Ooh.
Yeah, so you don't need to go and like open up each thing and try to figure it out. Like that is super cool.
I mean, to be fair, even if you were in that org and built the flow, but it was like 8 months ago.
You're not going to remember.
No.
No, absolutely
Are you kidding?
not.
I couldn't tell you what I had for breakfast this weekend.
Exactly.
Oh, man. That's super. That's like part of that goes back to the other stuff that was always super popular at Dreamforce and TDX was like documenting your org. And the ability to do that, you think of that, Jen, then that's easily, you could spend a couple hours and get descriptions of all your flows. And now you've got some documentation on flows started. There's probably a way to save that in the flow, right?
Well, you summarize that, and then there's a button that will save it to the flow properties. So as a general description of your overall flow, you can save it right there.
I mean, so there's no reason people shouldn't have this.
Exactly. Yes. All right. So we're going to move on to user management, and Cheryl Feldman and team continue to deliver and make lives of admins so much easier by minimizing the number of clicks they have to do to go and troubleshoot all things permission. So a couple things. A highlight for this one is at the object level, right? Let's say you have users that need view access to all the fields in that object, along with, view all records, modify all. There's now a new view all fields permission at the object level. So you check that, and that automatically sets all the fields on that object to view access. And when you create new fields going forward, it'll automatically check the box for those fields. So you don't have to remember and go back.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes.
The number of times I've created whole areas of fields and forgot.
It makes me want to go back and be an admin at companies. Yeah.
I mean, it's so much easier now. I feel like, people in the ecosystem listen to our stories and like, it sounds like when our grandparents were like, we used to walk to school both ways uphill. Like, no, it really was hard.
And then for permission sets on that summary page, you can now grant access to your permission set groups. And then you can also remove user and custom permissions at the permission set level. So it really minimizes clicks. Like you're in the permission set, you can then assign it to permission set groups. You don't have to go navigate out of it elsewhere in setup in order to do that.
Right. That can be awfully tedious.
Yes. Minimizing all those clicks. Love it.
I mean, I was wondering when permission sets and all of the permission set groups started coming out. Like, you're from the old days of profiles and the millions of checkboxes. I thought, boy,
yes.
Once they start rolling this out, there's going to be like hidden corners of the universe that admins are going to have to search to try and figure out why somebody can see something and they can't. And I mean, just to pile on, but like, thank goodness that Cheryl came along and was an admin and understood that, because it was like, no, I've been there, and here's how this needs to work. And it was from like a usability standpoint as opposed to an engineering standpoint. So it makes permission set groups, all of that totally consumable.
And I love how her group is really receptive to listening to admins. Like, okay, tell me what you're doing today to do this task. Like, what are the steps? Why do you need to manage things in spreadsheets? Tell me why, so I can solve that for you in Salesforce.
Yeah, in fact, in less than a month from when this podcast airs, she'll be at TDX, and I promise you, those sessions are packed. The Q&A afterward, it's like you would think Taylor Swift showed up at TDX, and you just turn, you're like, nope, that's just Cheryl Feldman.
Yeah. So go and attend her Future of User Management session. Those, I've sat in on a couple of those, and the number of claps and hollers as she's going through and saying like, this is coming and this is coming. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yep.
So a couple other things that her team is delivering in this release. On the group summary page, you can now view all the sharing rules and list views that you've assigned to groups. So all in one place. You don't have to navigate to each of those things, right? Again, minimizing the clicks. And then also in the Salesforce Cloud Go, you can now view, assign permission sets, and then monitor their usage in that tool as well.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah. And even more to come.
These are the highlights.
You're not done.
You got to read everything, but you know. Okay. What else you got, Jen?
All right. And then lastly, I got to rattle off some flow things, right? I touched on some, but there's so much more. A few releases ago for screen flows, the team delivered action buttons. So on a screen, you can click a button and then it does some other things. You don't have to click next to go to the next screen. Well, in this release, they now introduce screen actions. So when you do, like, let's say you do a lookup on a contact, and as soon as you select that contact, it comes back with like the associated cases, for example, or opportunities. You don't even have to click the button. It does it for you. So that, again, minimizes clicks. And then, again, when you're working on screen flows, you want to give your users a sense of where they are in the progression of their flow, right? How many times have you worked on a survey, right? And you're like, how many screens is this survey, right?
It's never going to end. It's perpetual.
Or I'm just going to quit because I'm done.
I'm done. You should have everything.
Right? So now we can set stages on a progress bar for your screen flow without requiring a custom progress indicator that before you would have to build a custom component for. So now it's
it's like Path, but for okay, I'll take that. Yeah. I have wondered, because you don't know when you build, like most of the screens I build are simple because I don't have your skill, but like I always wondered, like you get 3 or 4 screens in, like, well, I wonder if I could put a little cartoon up of almost there, keep going.
Exactly. All right, a few more things. So when you're in Flow Builder now, and let's say you're managing multiple versions of this flow, and you're like, well, which one? I don't remember if it was the previous version or this other version. And then you had to navigate out of that flow a couple clicks to go into another flow version. Well, now you can access it right in that flow. There's a little drop down and you can see all the different versions. And when you click on that, it opens that up. So a lot of saving clicks.
This is cool. And you include a screenshot in your blog post.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea I needed this until I saw the screenshot. And I'm like, oh, yeah, now I need this.
I love just doing those GIFs because it really like brings the feature to life. Like you don't just read it, you can actually see it in action.
Right.
Yeah.
So what, this may be a silly question. No silly questions. I know what active means. I mean, that's the current flow. But like in your screenshot, there are some that are inactive and some that are deactivated. What are the differences in those statuses?
Deactivated is probably a flow that you had activated at one point and then you deactivated it. Now, inactive is a flow that you're probably just working on that you haven't saved, but you haven't done anything else with it.
Okay. Got it. Just making sure. I figured somebody might have that question. It's like on deck. Inactive is like a version, but not ever been activated.
All right. So for those who have a need to combine things, so in Flow, you can have a collection of records. Now in this transform element, you can now join two source collections into a target collection. So for example, let's say you had records that contain information from a third-party system and they needed to be combined with data from Salesforce to make a complete record. Well, now in your flow, you can take those two sources and combine them together with the transform element. So you don't have to go through that complex logic of looping through and doing all those things. You can take one element and magically combine them together.
Combining's good.
And then lastly, for those who need to send emails as part of your automation and you need to attach something to those emails, well, you can now do that using the send email action. You can attach emails. Just know that there is a 35 megabyte max size, and that includes the size of the file.
Wow. That's pretty decent. You know, Google has like 25, so you should be okay.
Yeah, like let's say you needed to send
like a PDF or something.
A PDF of a coupon or something like that. Yeah. FAQs.
I like that. Boy, people, I thought 2025 we would be done with email by now. I don't think email's ever going to go anywhere. No, we're going to be emailing and attaching things forever. And I was just scrolling through your post and I caught up to the little path thing. I really like that. And I like that it's visually consistent with what path looks like.
And just a couple of things outside of those three major categories is you can now multi-column sort on your list views and related records up to 5 fields. So you don't have to just single sort and you're like, oh, well, what if I sorted by this field and I want to sort by this other field? You can now do that.
Yeah. Oh, man. That's life right there. The ability to do that, that's the number of times that you've had to export list views or reports to
the spreadsheet.
Something else. Yeah. I couldn't bring myself to say those words. Just multi-column sort. Yeah, descending here and alphabetic over here makes sense to me.
And then for your dashboards, now, if you had a need to refresh a specific widget in your whole dashboard, you can now do so without having to refresh the entire thing.
Oh, so you can refresh just a component without refreshing the whole data. Nice. That'll also help. That helps everywhere because that helps with, the number of calls and stuff because then Salesforce doesn't have to rerun all of those reports. Oh, brilliant. That was always the big pain, especially you've probably built some monstrous dashboards and you get done. You're like, okay, I'm going to refresh this, go to the break room, come back in about 20 minutes.
Right. Get a cup of coffee.
Yeah. See if everything's back. And then it was always, what was the one? It would always be like the easiest report would be the first one to refresh. Some line chart or that accelerator bar. And you're like, that's not the one I wanted. Come on.
And then I'll leave you with one last feature is, so now for your internal users, you have the ability to customize the welcome email. So it's not going to just be that standard Salesforce email. You can customize it with your branding, your instruction, like personalize it so that the user who gets it, they're like, I don't know what the Salesforce thing is.
Oh, that is 24 years in the making.
It's the little things in life.
That was also the fun part of emailing a new user and be like, you're going to get this email from Salesforce. And inevitably, unless you were sending it to somebody in sales, there was like, but I'm not in sales.
Yeah.
Like, I understand. You're also not in force either. So it's the name of the program. It's just like roll with things. This is awesome. Hey, one thing we haven't covered, and I think it's evolution, because you and I grew up back in the olden days when we would print the release notes. Also, the release notes weren't a gabillion pages.
And you'd like have the highlighter.
You'd have the highlighter. Yes. I had a whole user group presentation on highlighting stuff. I learned that from Andy up in the Wisconsin user group. What's your tactic? If you're a new admin joining today, what's your tactic for getting through release notes? I mean, obviously, nobody reads them all. Well, somebody probably does. God bless them. But for to find the important stuff and the relevant stuff, what's kind of, if you were giving advice to somebody just starting out, what would that be?
Yeah. So before I worked with Salesforce, I was a customer, right? So I was in your shoes. And what I did was I would go to the release notes and I'd search on things right away that I knew my company used, right? Things like flow, app building. If I had Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, I would look at those areas just to be aware of what's coming down the pike. And then if I had additional time, I'd look at a couple of the other things, but definitely you want to look at those things, anything security related, because you don't want to be caught off guard of if there was a new security feature and you weren't aware of it. And definitely read through the release updates. It's also in your org and setup. It'll go through and highlight the updates and when they'd be enforced, how to go about testing them. Release updates are pieces of functionality, things like performance enhancements, security enhancements that Salesforce is pushing through to the platform. So it's really important to be mindful of those because you are given a time frame before that release update is in force. So you definitely want to give yourself enough time to test it out in a sandbox. In some cases, it might change the behavior or something, and you need to take action on it in your org in order for it to work once that release update is enabled. So you definitely want to get ahead of it. And again, test.
Yes, sandboxes are your friend.
Yes.
Thanks so much, Jen, for coming on. This blog is just incredibly helpful.
I can talk about releases all day long.
I know you can. That would be that could be like a whole day seminar that we could create. Like, come see Jen talk about releases and flows. And it's like the AM for releases and the PM for flows. And there you go. We just have to have, enough fluids to keep you going. But no doubt. And some of this, I mean, the stuff that Cheryl's working on, it can feel like, oh, why are you guys getting so excited for that? Because it's like the little things. It's like smoothing out the rough edges.
Yeah. I mean, the less time you spend on those things, the more time you can spend on the fun stuff, right? Building the new things for your users.
Right. Well, I appreciate this, and I'll be sure to include a link in the post that links back to this blog for people. So how much fun was that chat with Jennifer about the Spring 25 release features? Seriously, if features were a game show, she'd be the reigning champion. I'm sure you're probably nodding along taking furious notes, but don't worry. Links to her blog post will be included in the show notes, which can all be found on admin.salesforce.com, including a transcript in case you missed anything on the podcast. Now, don't forget to join the discussion over in the Admin Trailblazer group that is in the Trailblazer community. Link for that is over in the show notes. So until next week, we'll see you in the cloud.